Welcome in to Bears Weekly, powered by IGS Energy, a Chicago Bears network production. Bears Weekly is brought to you by Advocate Healthcare, Athletico Physical Therapy, CDW, Connie's Pizza, IGS Energy, and Miller Lite. Here are your hosts, Jeff Joniak, a.k.a. the Mayor of Bearsville, and his sidekick, Tom the Surfmaster Thayer.
Hallis Hall popping once again with Phase 1 of the Offseason program underway and the draft just weeks away. We tackle all of it tonight on Bears Weekly on ESPN 1000 and the Chicago Bears Radio Network. Good to have you here tonight with Super Bowl winning Bears guard Tom Thayer, and shortly the former Bears quarterback Jim Miller from SiriusXM NFL Radio. I'm Jeff Joniak. Coming up on the program, we visit with passing game coordinator Press Taylor, one of the new additions on Ben Johnson's coaching staff. I want to thank our producers tonight, Dan Briley, Jordan Tredup, and in the ESPN studio, Kendra Smith. Our executive producer of the Bears Radio Network is Eric Ostrowski. Good evening, everybody. Tom, how you feeling tonight?
I'm feeling good, Jeff. You know, a lot of excitement this week in terms of the NFL as a whole, but for the Chicago Bears most certainly. And I think the players and the staff kind of got a taste of each other. And I think the seriousness of what is the journey that's set ahead of them, all the new opportunities for a guy like Ben Johnson and his staff, and a lot of new opportunities for the growth and the potential of a lot of players on this team. So I think this is going to be an exciting spring to watch step by step as this team develops.
All right, so we heard the podium. You and I discussed it a little bit on Bears Etc. this week. Caleb Williams, Darnell Wright, Jermaine Edmonds, Jalen Johnson. Overall, if you had to congregate all the different answers they gave, what was the common theme out of the four, in your opinion?
You know, I think the way the season ended last year and the guys visited the podium and that word accountability was brought up by a bunch of players. And I think the players want the accountability to transfer into the locker room. And, you know, it's almost like Jalen Johnson. If you see something, say something. If you want guys to have more dedication or a better effort in the practice field, in the meeting room, in the weight room, showing up on time, then hold each other accountable in those terms. And I think when you bring the leaders up to the podium in the early portion of a new league year, you kind of get a taste of what these guys want and where they want to go. Because like Ben Johnson said when he took this job, this is not a 5-year project. This is a win-now project, and I think that's really an important message that he got out there early and these players got to understand.
Also, what did you think of the demeanor of Caleb?
Listen, man, you know, that's the thing about it. You and I talked about it. Caleb has never disappointed me. To some of the most difficult podium visits he had throughout last year, to the early portion of when he came aboard and how confident of a player he was. But he also understands there's going to be some new parts of his job that he's going to have to get fundamentally at ease with, and it's going to have to become second nature, and it's going to have to be like he's taking a breath of air from some of the aspects of his job in terms of working under center, the footwork that you need so all that works accordingly. So, listen, Caleb has never disappointed me, and he didn't with his first visit.
All right, so there can be no other way to frame it. The excitement that we've been discussing from the outside in is now starting to bubble up and inside out of the building, Tom. Would you agree that is exactly the case? From everything you're hearing, the people you talk to, hearing the players on the podium, just the little scraps and the breadcrumbs that we're putting together.
You know, everything that I've heard come out of Ben Johnson's mouth from the time he was introduced as a new head coach in Hallis Hall to what he said at the Combine, what he's done at every one of his podium visits in front of the media, he's never disappointed me as well. And he always said something that's kind of refreshing in terms of the responsibilities of the players, get comfortable being uncomfortable, the different things that he wants to do to a quality quarterback and a great athlete quarterback like Caleb, and how he can expand his game, the differences that he sees within this offense, what he can do with and for a guy like Cole Kmet, and then the different difficult choices that the competitiveness of these players is going to, help those decisions. And then I like everything that I've heard out of Dennis Allen. And I'm excited to see this new philosophical thinking of the defense and the different types of coverages he likes to play, what he likes to do at the line of scrimmage, how he deploys the defensive assets he has. And like I said, from right now through the spring portion and into summer camp, I think it's going to be really fun to watch it develop. All
right, you raise a good point. So Tremaine Edmonds and T.J. Edwards, some of the drafted players all came here under a regime of Matt Eberflus and a certain style of defense. Now you bring in Dennis Allen. Tremaine is still a young player, even though he has spent a lot of time in the NFL with both Buffalo now and the Bears. But players like that across the board, let's even throw in Montez Sweat coming aboard a couple years ago. Does this revitalize each and every one of those players, the veterans that are coming in, because they haven't worked with Dennis Allen? They know exactly how he's going to coach them or what he has to offer. Now they're learning it up there this week, little pieces of it. But will this revitalize that defense?
I do think it's going to revitalize the defense. But I also think that when you're playing for a new position coach, you're playing for a new coordinator, you're playing for a new head coach, there's a certain sense of seriousness that goes along with that. Is you have to allow the coaches to see your work ethic, your approach to professionalism, what you do to make sure that you're mentally and physically prepared for what's at stake. Because, I guess you have a reputation, but you haven't earned anything in front of this new coaching staff that's what's at stake. Is if you have a reputation that precedes you, can you live up to it? If you're a guy that has potential, can you show this potential and the signs of growth? So there's a lot of things that every one of these coaches, position coaches and coordinators are going to be looking at to see how you can put all the right pieces in place.
All right, joining us now from NFL Radio, Sirius XM, the former Bears quarterback Jim Miller back with us. Jim, how you feeling? What's the word in the league right now? What's the big news today? I know Abdul Carter had his medical recheck, so that's big news for the arguably the top player, regardless of position in the NFL draft in many people's minds, but a player that you got to keep an eye on this. The stress reaction in his foot is healing, improvement, no surgery, according to his agent Drew Rosenhaus.
Yeah, I think he's a big part. We had, I'm not going to name the name, but a former general manager, they questioned whether Abdul Carter can really hold up against the run. So it's not only his health. They question, how strong is he? How good is he with his hands? Can he shed the blocks? And everybody just assumes he's going to be the surefire, best pass rusher in the draft that is drafted. And he comes with a medical history, and then probably Shedeur Sanders, the Colorado quarterback. He's probably been the most polarizing player heading into the draft, and other guys seem to be gaining steam, like Milroe from Alabama. I think Milroe he really played well down at the Reese's Senior Bowl. He showed all his skills, a big arm. There are college players that said he's probably the toughest quarterback they had to play against, but I think it's Milroe rising, and it seems like Sanders is dropping. Is leading up to the draft.
Yeah, that's interesting. Tom, what's your take on Jalen Milroe? I mean, when you see him at the Senior Bowl, as we did, up close, boy, the body looks tremendous. He's got the size. He's super smart. He's a great leader. He's got the athleticism. There are just things in his overall toolbox in terms of technique and fundamentals that need to be shored up a bit. You get him with the right team, the right coach, man, you're tapping into a gold mine potentially.
Jeff, let me analogize this, because you and I last year were talking about Joe Milton. And remember, we saw him throw some passes that were 65, 75 yards, and what an athlete he looked like. And you kind of go, wow, what is the potential of this guy, and what can ultimately happen to him throughout his career? I kind of think of the same thing between these two guys. They're dynamic athletes. They have incredible traits. They played at major programs. They showed signs of athletic brilliance. But now when you're into the pro-level game, can everything develop according to the template that we see that's running 40, throwing footballs, doing everything that's asked of them to show off their athleticism, and can that compute into quarterback play?
Jim, what are your thoughts?
I like Milroe. To me, he reminds me a lot of Jalen Hurts. Not only, his production running the football, and that's where a lot of defensive players like Hunter Wohler, the safety for Wisconsin, came on our airways and said that. He said he was by far the toughest quarterback they played against because they couldn't tackle him in space, what you can do. And I guess think about this, Tom, his 10-yard split, I guess, at his pro day was like 1-4-1. It was something ridiculous. I mean, he basically ran a sub 4.4 40. So he's in the 4.3 range is where he's at, is my point. And he's not a polished passer. I think you saw it, Jeff, and you were calling plays in the game where he's not accurate because his feet don't marry up with his arm. But he's got a big arm. He can spin the football. He's just got to become a more polished passer like, say, Jalen Hurts. And that's Jalen Hurts. You know, he transferred from Alabama to Oklahoma, played really well. He won a lot of games, but then he kind of sat in the NFL, and they were kind of develop him behind Carson Wentz. And then he bursts onto the scene. He plays well. Now he gets the big contract. Now he wins a Super Bowl, and we'll see where he can go. But I think a lot of teams think that could be the path for Milroe from Alabama because he is extremely talented.
Well, one of the interesting thing is Hunter Roll, a bad man. So if he said it was the toughest, I love that player for sure. All right, when we come back, we'll be joined by the new passing game coordinator of the Chicago Bears, assistant coach Press Taylor, here on Bears Weekly on ESPN 1000 and the Bears Radio Network.
Welcome back to Bears Weekly on the Bears Radio Network. Here's your host, the voice of the Bears, Jeff Joniak.
This segment of Bears Weekly is brought to you by IGS Energy.
Welcome back to Bears Weekly on ESPN Chicago and the Bears Radio Network. Jeff Joniak with one of the new members of the Bears coaching staff in our Get to Know You series, Press Taylor, coming over for his first year with the Bears, but an extensive career in coaching with Philadelphia. I know I'm going to miss a few, but last stop was Jacksonville, and the brother of Zach Taylor, the head coach of the Cincinnati Bengals. And yes, there will be a Pro Bowl again this year, so on the road at his place. I don't know what your records are facing each other. I bet you know, though.
I think we're tied, actually. I don't think we've ever played up there, but I think we're tied.
Yeah, okay. Well, it's a great story, the two of you. And I noticed on an old article that I was researching in the Florida Times-Union, there's a picture of you both as little kids with Coach Ditka.
That's right.
It said after an NFL game. Were you at an NFL game?
My first ever NFL game was 1992. It was here in December. I think I know this because they wrote an article about my brother playing Jim Harbaugh because Jim Harbaugh was the quarterback at the time.
Okay.
So in 92, they beat the Steelers like 30-6 that weekend. That was my first ever NFL game.
Do you remember how that all came about? Like, why Chicago that weekend?
Well, my dad coached at Kansas State, and the strength coach at the time was a guy named Russ Reeder, who was the strength coach here.
Yes.
So we came to visit his family and all that and had a whole weekend in Chicago.
That's pretty cool. That picture will find its way back to the paper here because it's a great picture. Do you like the mix, first of all? Do you like the mix of different influences and ages on this coaching staff, both sides of the ball?
I love it. I mean, that's kind of one thing is Ben didn't bring a ton of people that worked with him. You know, there's two guys, I think JT and Antoine, that were on a staff with Ben, but otherwise it's a lot of people that maybe know him through the grapevine or whatever that came to be, just interviewed and decided to hire. So I think it's cool to just be able to combine a bunch of different experiences and build something here.
You guys are in the lab, so to speak, at this point. So what has that experience been like with all these different minds, especially on your side of the ball, obviously your side of the ball, because you've called plays, you've been an offensive coordinator. Just what has those breakdowns been like to kind of carve out what this scheme will look like?
Yeah, that's the fun part about it. Right now, it's all kind of just learn what has been done, what Ben did in Detroit, what made them so successful, learn all that. And then as we get to know our players, we get to know what fits us. You start to even hear Ben's kind of evolution through their offense and his time as the offense coordinator in Detroit. And eventually it's going to become whatever it becomes for us this season. And it ebbs and flows every single season. You thought you were going to be something, you become something else. Your players are better at something different, and you pivot as quickly as you can. So you want to build something now that you're able to pivot quickly and seamlessly, and guys understand and grasp why it's called what it's called or why we teach it a certain way.
Yeah, I've made a big deal out of the point. I think Ben tried to emphasize it as well. Whatever happened in Detroit. It's going to be the Bears offense.
Right.
To your point, you're going to construct it to the strengths and traits of your players, and that roster is still yet to be determined before you get to training camp. How important is that so that you're open-minded to what this offense can be as a staff?
Yeah, I think that's everything. You want to do what your players do well. You want to put them all in position to maximize their strengths. And a lot of it you're going to build around your quarterback. So, as we get to know Caleb and continue to grow with him and watch him grow and learn the system, then how can we put him in the best situations possible?
All right, so that being said, you just got, with your experience in Jacksonville and Trevor Lawrence, what was that like for you as you now continue your career in the role you are here with the Bears, and just what you learned from that experience?
Yeah, you learn a ton every single year. Every single year the game just continues to evolve, and you want to stay in front of it, really. But working with young quarterbacks has been a lot of fun. I've been able to do it with a lot of different guys throughout the course of my career, but Trevor was no different. Trevor, I think there's a lot of growth still ahead of him for his game, but just working in connection with him and lockstep with him, and the offense kind of goes as the quarterback sees it. And so you want to come up with new ideas, you want to build it around him, but you really have to be in sync with the quarterback to be able to really maximize it.
Press Taylor, our guest here on ESPN Chicago and the Bears Radio Network. This is Bears Weekly. You mentioned some of those other quarterbacks, Carson Wentz, obviously, Jalen Hurts, who congratulations to him. Really love this football player, gritty as they come, as you know. Right. Michael Vick, even, at one time. Everybody does a little bit something different. I just mentioned a lot of guys who are mobile. Nick Foles was not,
right.
But dangerous as can be and won a Super Bowl. Did it matter to you as you embarked on this coaching career, to try to get as many different types of quarterbacks in your background? I mean, obviously, it depends where you're at, but has that helped you form thought process on scheme and so forth?
Yeah, I think that certainly helped. Obviously, you want to be in one place with one quarterback for a long time, having a lot of success. That's just not the way it goes for most people. But it's been great. You mentioned it, but Michael Vick, Nick Foles, Sam Bradford, Carson Wentz, in 2 different stops, Trevor Lawrence. It's just cool to see how all of these obviously high-level players, how they process, how they think, what hits their brain, how they handle certain situations, because every offense changes. I mean, we went from a year where we had Carson Wentz to Nick Foles and won a Super Bowl, and the offense changed over the course of a couple weeks. And I think it just reemphasizes the need to put the quarterback in the best possible position.
So what has been added to this point as the timing of this conversation with the interior three, this league and those who cover it have focused only on the left tackle being significant. Then all of a sudden, you got to pay a right tackle too. Now, wait a minute. You got to have 3 interior guys so the guy can have a nice pocket to step up into. The fact of the matter is you need 5 really good offensive linemen that play as many snaps as they possibly can together to make an offense motor, right?
Exactly, and you got to keep them healthy, which is the biggest battle, I think, in the NFL throughout the course of a season. But, yeah, now with how good these defensive tackles are and just the speed of the defense, the size of the defense as well, you really can't have a weak spot or you're going to get exposed, especially with how good these defense coordinators are in creating those matchups. I
saw this stat. I mentioned it to my broadcast partner, Tom Thayer, the 85 Bears starting right guard. I was shocked. I guess I shouldn't be. We've had a lot of issues with offensive line stability here with injuries and whatnot. Last season, there was one team in the league that had 80% of the snaps offensively with the same 5, and 18 teams, less than 40% of the snaps with the same 5 offensive line. Now, at the top down, most of those teams went to the playoffs. Right. So I'm theorizing then, hey, this is important, like as much as possible, but apparently hard to do.
Very hard to do.
How hard is that for a coach?
I mean, that's tough, but that's what comes with the job. I mean, you have to be able to – nobody cares. The schedule comes out in April, and we're going to play all those games no matter what. So you figure out who's available. You pivot as quickly as you possibly can. You put a plan together, and then you react to whatever happens throughout the course of the game, because a lot of times you're losing guys first, second, third play, first, second, third quarter. Whatever that is, the game goes on. So you got to figure out how to put everybody in position.
Your title is passing game coordinator, but I do believe the Bears are going to run the football too.
I think so.
Is that going to be a big part of this, you believe?
I think so. And again, it's what are we doing well? I mean, there's a lot of different ways to win a game, and those ways change each week. They change within a game. But I think we want to be able to establish that sort of identity that we can run the ball if that's what it takes to win that week. So we're not going to say we're not going to be able to do anything.
Exactly. There's a lot to discuss on Caleb Williams. Just from your review to this point, any thoughts on how his first year went and what his future looks like?
Yeah, obviously a super talented player. That just jumps off the film as you watch, and some of the plays he makes, some of the scrambled throws he's able to make as well, and the creation he has. But at times, to be a great player in this league, you got to be consistent, and that's something that is tough for a lot of quarterbacks, but rookie quarterbacks especially. And so that's just something, being able to work with him, get to know him, learn him a little bit, and how can we help him be in a position where he's able to just repeat things over and over and over, with play calls, concepts, throws, trying to make everything look as similar as possible for him so that he's able to really thrive and take off.
It's challenge calling his games because you think he's running out of bounds on a scramble, and at the very last second he's ripping off a beautiful throw to the end zone for a touchdown. So he keeps you on your toes.
He does.
For a fan, an announcer, and probably a coach as well. Final moments here with Press Taylor, Bears passing game coordinator, one of the new members of the Bears coaching staff here for 2025. I want to touch on your influences a little bit. Obviously, you're the son of a coach. Your dad, Sherwood, was a coach in college. You grew up in Norman, Oklahoma. I have a daughter, a graduate of OU, so I got a feel for what that's like over there. You grew up in a neighborhood with just amazing athletes, apparently, and had some amazing influences from all those different athletes in sports. But you also worked with guys like Chip Kelly, Frank Reich, Doug Peterson. Is it helped define who you are as a coach, or are you charting your own path, so to speak?
I'd like to think. I think you're influenced, obviously, by the people you're around. And I'm thankful that the people I have been around have been great people, have been open to sharing their thought process, their ideas. But you're going to take what fits you, and what, again, each year changes. So you reserve the right to change every single year as well. So what I believe probably 10 years ago, I probably don't believe as much now, or I've pivoted through. And then there's some things that these are foundational elements of your coaching philosophy or how you view offensive football, whatever that may be, that are time-tested. But things change, the game changes. You just want to grow every single year and get a little bit better.
True or false? You kind of came up with the Philly special. True or false?
I get credited with putting it into our playbook that year. It was actually stolen from the Chicago Bears.
Yes.
The direct one was a steal from Matt Barkley. That was the one we decided to go with and put into our playbook.
And that's when you're a young coach and you're scanning the globe
Right.
for tape
you watch a
cut-ups,
lot of
right?
random plays. So a random 2-point play in a Week 18 meaningless game.
Well, how about what Ben Johnson's created? Every single player that's come in here from either side of the ball have mentioned, the first thing they mention about Ben Johnson, he's creative.
Right.
Players dig that, don't they?
Absolutely. It's something that keeps them on their toes. It's something that's fun. And when they hit, especially to the success level that the Detroit Lions had, that's a lot of fun to see and a lot of fun to be a part of.
Why is your first name Press?
My middle name is actually Press, but I'm named after my dad was a diehard Pete Maravich fan.
Ooh, Pistol Pete.
Yep, and he was coached by his dad. His dad is Press Maravich. So
okay.
Before I was born, my dad was telling my mom the story, heard the name, and she just said that's his name.
Okay, that's a great one to have.
Yeah.
Anybody who has never seen this young audience that we have, go YouTube Pistol Pete Maravich and his ball handling mastery. I loved that player. Anyway, welcome to Chicago.
Thank you.
Great to be a part of the Charter franchise. I'm sure that has a lot of meaning for a man who loves football like you do, and we look forward to great things moving forward. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
That's Press Taylor. We'll continue with Bears Weekly on ESPN Chicago and the Bears Radio Network.
This is Bears Weekly with the voice of the Bears for 24 years, Jeff Joniak on the Bears Radio Network.
This segment of Bears Weekly is brought to you by Athletico Physical Therapy. Visit athletico.com to request an in-clinic or virtual appointment and start feeling better tomorrow. Jeff and Tom and Jim Miller from SiriusXM NFL Radio. Just heard Taylor in our last segment, the Bears passing game coordinator. So many things to talk about there. Tom, number one, he brought up that 92 Pittsburgh game. That was, Tom reminded me that was Mike Singletary's final game. And I talked to Zach Taylor, Jim and Tom, about that game as well at the owners' meeting the other day, last week, and he said all he remembers about coming to Soldier Field was, they had sideline passes, the whole bit. Russ Reeder, the former strength coach of the Bears, whom we all know very well, but he said what he remembers is the fights in the stands. That was their first NFL game they ever went to.
One thing about that game, so we started out really hot that season. And so we started out like 4-0, and then we went on a losing streak. Dan Hampton got hurt, and we lost like maybe 8 or 9 in a row. And Dick said to the press, I don't think this team is good enough to win another game the rest of the season. And then they had the last home game in the celebration of Mike Singletary's career, and we had no business beating the Steelers, but we went out there and beat the Steelers. And I remember that game like it was yesterday, and when he brought it up, I have still photos from it. I have a bunch of pictures, but just that whole day, I remember like it was yesterday because we got threatened with our jobs. We went out and won that game. It was a great send-off for Mike Singletary. And then now you got Press Taylor, the new Bears passing game coordinator, was at that game and takes a picture with Mike Ditka.
Right, and Zach Taylor. Jim, I mean, the veins and arteries of football. I mean, you never know what you're going to learn. These guys at the University of Oklahoma were just toddlers when their dad was an assistant coach there. And the neighborhood they grew up in, and maybe, Jim, you've heard about this story from talking to Zach Taylor over the years or whatever, it was called the Trails neighborhood there in Norman. It was 33 kids were in this cul-de-sac. Most of them were boys, so they created so many games. They did something called cutthroat football on a 40-yard field they made up. They videotaped their games and broke down the tape as kids. I mean, they had Ryan Broyles, Zach Selman from the famous Selman family, Kellen Sampson, who just was in the national title game assisting his father, the Houston Cougars basketball coach. So, I mean, crazy stories like this, Jim.
Yeah, I mean, well, I just think that, when you grow up in it and it's part of your family and it just becomes a part of you, when you're around it and you experience it. And, those are probably all the stories at the dinner table and the big games, in the upcoming game and what you're watching, what you're doing, what you're participating in. And it all has an effect on you. And it's, obviously positive for him. It's something that he wanted to be a part of, to make it a part of his life, to be in it in one way, shape, or form because he was around it so much. And that's, I just know for me, I know Tom Thayer is because he's a football lifer. Jeff here, I just hear, as we welcome, back to, or get reacquainted with the show and they welcome back, you're 24 years with the Bears now. It's a part of you.
This will be 25 for us. Yeah.
Yeah. And,
crazy.
I'm a lifer. You're a lifer. Tom's a lifer. And when you get that football bug, and for me, it was when I first started playing in Pop Warner, and you kind of never look back. And I kind of knew it was something that was going to be a part of my life. Even when I retired from football, I knew in one way, shape, or form it was going to be a part of my life. Here I am 54 now, and it literally has been a part of my life out of the 54 years on this earth, basically 45 of them,
Wow.
45 of them. And so that's, it's just, it becomes a part of you.
Yeah, I mean, it's the greatest sport. I don't care what anybody says. And people who are in it try to stay in it for as long as they can until somebody says, we can't use you anymore, in whatever regard it is, on the field or off. Tom, let's look at from an offensive passing game coordinator perspective here. His quote of, offense goes as the quarterback sees it. We hear that from Ben Johnson, that from the coach to the player to the center, they all have to see the game the same way, but the truth in that is so significant. The offense goes as the quarterback sees it, and yet on the other side of the ball, the defense continues to make it hard to see what you're looking at.
Yeah, the first thing, the mental part of seeing the game correctly and how efficiently what you're saying that you're able to see. And then there's the evaluation process that they go through with these individual players in what Caleb does well. What are his true gems? What are his assets? How does he throw the ball against these different patterns that you already have designed and that you put them on a blackboard, but now you have to take them out to the field of play. And it's a continuous evaluation process of the quarterback, what his traits are, what you think he can do well, and then how the offensive line is going to complement the protections, and then how the offensive line complements the protections, and how the receivers threaten the downfield opportunities. And that's when, to me, what I like about Ben the most is he talks so passionately about play-action passing, because I think that can really do the most to benefit this offense, because play action feeds off the running game. You have to run the ball well in order to be deceptive about the play action passing game. And I think with the athleticism and the talents of Caleb, he's going to flourish with the play action passing game. And I think it's going to open up more opportunities. And I think I was looking at stats as 2 years ago, Cole Kmet had 73 catches. Last year he had 47. It was something like that. So, I mean, he's a guy that really has a real upside from play-action passing as much as anybody does in this offense, just like all the tight ends. Not only Cole, but I think all the tight ends can benefit for the vision that Ben Johnson has.
Jim, I don't know how you feel about this, but I've said this a time or two over the course of my career, just meeting so many coaches in my life already, and you experienced it from inside the huddle and inside the room. But there's a tendency for offensive coordinators to become stubborn. Now, that could be a good thing and a bad thing. The good thing is that you got to believe in what you believe in, and you got to stick to it, because if you're wishy-washy, no one in your room is going to believe what you're saying the next day. The other part of it is, though, do you take input or do you adjust that will allow you to put yourself in a position to win the game? And I like what Press had to say. We will do what we need to do to win a game. So if you go in with a game plan, it's just not working, you go to plan B. You got to do whatever you can to squeeze out that win. Do you believe that stubborn factor sometimes haunts offensive play callers?
Yeah, I do. I specifically remember games where, where we would run on first down, and then if you get no gain, they are calling a pass. Really, the second play, they the play caller will lose the confidence in it. And, and I always bring up that example of Jerome Bettis. I remember being on the road at the Oakland Raiders. We're out in Oakland. The place was just, it's Steelers-Raiders. It's a big matchup. It's a rivalry game type of, for the AFC because of great postseasons, the great postseason games that they've been in. So there was a lot of passion. There's a lot of excitement. The crowd was loud. But I remember going into the game where Bill Cowher said, we are going to have a lot of negative plays. Their defense was so good. He said they're going to penetrate. He goes, but we will wear them down. It will be the second half where we will run the football well. But we have to stick to it, and we have to be patient. And you can't lose your confidence, so to speak. And he preached it all week, and so much so that we believed as players. And it was ugly the first half. It was ugly. We'd rush for no yards, and then it'd be -4, but we were calling the run plays. And we would wear them down. And a lot of play callers would not do that. If you get a negative play right away on 2nd and 14, they're throwing a pass. But not the Steelers. We were 2nd and 14. Well, guess what? Well, let's go to draw play here. We're calling run plays because we knew over time we were going to do it. So that was stubborn by Bill Cowher, but they knew the game plan was going to ultimately work. But they had to tell the players, you need to believe in this. This is going to happen, and it'll work. And I've been in other games where, we did think the game plan was going to work, but hey, coach, they're not rushing the way you thought, or they're not playing it the way you thought. We need to go to this play or that play, and this is what they're doing. And the coach would adjust because that's what coaching is making adjustments. You've got to adapt and adjust. They're not, playing the defenses that we thought that they were going to play on down and distance, and we had to change up the game plan. We went off the script, and right away we're on to something new because we knew what we had practiced was not going to work. And so you've got to be able to do that, and you have to listen to your players, in terms of receivers, coverages that they're playing. Hey, coach, yeah, they're playing press coverage, but it's a press bail. At the snap of the ball, he's not playing me hard as a hard corner. He's bailing right away. So we will have a hitch route on the outside. He'll be 7 yards off, and I can just hook it up at 4 yards, and we'll be good. And if the play caller's listening to the players, you can get a lot of information about down and distance and things that maybe you should be focused on that maybe you weren't earlier. And it changes as the game goes along.
Sorry, Jim. That's one of the things that I was encouraged by Press Taylor when you asked him, Jeff, and you brought up the statistics of the offensive lines, is because he immediately said, look, everybody's got to be ready to play. You never know when you're going to lose a player. So when you're talking about inserting a game plan, you're talking about making sure everybody is on the same page. So if they have to go in and play, you're not going to skip a beat, and you're not changing your game plan, and you're not changing the thinking of the game plan that you went into that game accordingly. So, it was like a off the tip of his tongue question that fit in perfectly, and there was no hesitation about that.
All right, we're going to take a break. When we come back, we delve into the draft and different ideas, and I'm not joking. Tom's brought it up many times. He keeps going to the 30-year mark. I don't know if it's true, if it'll be true. The most challenging, interesting, have no idea what's going to happen kind of draft for the whole league, let alone the Bears. We'll discuss next on Bears Weekly here on ESPN 1000 and the Bears Radio Network.
Welcome back to Bears Weekly on the Bears Radio Network. Here's your host, the voice of the Bears, Jeff Joniak.
This segment of Bears Weekly is brought to you by CDW. People who get it. Jeff and Tom and Jim Miller from SiriusXM NFL Radio. So let's discuss some things. First of all, Tom had some starters. I asked these guys, hey, you got any topics? Jim, he's got some starters. You ready for his starters? Here we go.
Yeah, let's hear it, man.
3 no-pad priorities as we start the offseason program, Phase 1. Tom, take the floor, buddy. I mean, what do you got? Top 3 no-pad priorities.
Well, go ahead. You read the first one because
Caleb Williams getting comfortable under center with his footwork.
Right, because I hear a lot of conversation. That's questions asked of him at the podium day one. And when I was growing up, and Jim was mentioning, football's been a part of his existence for 45 years. The same 45 years that football has been a part of my existence. And the first fundamental aspect that any quarterback ever learned throughout the starting point of their career is how to take a center-quarterback exchange from underneath center. And they ran the entirety of their offense from there, and then things started to pan out the more experience that you got throughout your time at the position. I don't think Caleb will have any difficulty at all mastering the under center quarterback exchange and being able to run an entire offense if that's the way it was for him. So I think those are one of the things that you can master with no pads on is the footwork that is relatable to every single play action, every single run play, every single drop back, roll out, whatever you're asking the quarterback to do. I think you can master the fundamentals with no pads on and on that one fundamental development.
Jim, what's the adjustment? Obviously, if you're going to pass off that under center snap and you turn your back to the defense, it's like an Etch-a-Sketch. Everything changes from what you saw at the line of scrimmage. That's that part. But the footwork, the technique, what's the biggest adjustment?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with Tom. Like a 3-step drop, 5-step drop, 7-step drop, it'll become rote memory, where you don't even have to think about it. It just, when you take the snap from underneath the center and say 90 hitch is called, 1, 2, 3, boop, ball's out of your hand. When the 5-step timing and 7-step timing comes at, and then when you mix in the play actions, 134, and then if it's 135, it's going to be different because your back is to the defense. So getting that coverage before you leave the center, you get that last peek. Are they rotating anything? Because right now I'm seeing cover 3. But when I turn my back to the defense, when I come back to set up, are they in cover 3 like I thought? Did they rotate the safeties? You better look and take another, and it all happens quick. They could go from cover 3 to cover 2 or to quarters or whatever. And so, but your indicators are when you're in your snap count. Red 80. All right, here's what they're showing me. Now at the snap of the ball, are they rotating to anything different? And you have to trust that your footwork that has become rote memory, you can't be thinking about that anymore. Your focus is on the defense and what they're presenting you. And for some guys, it's tough because when you drop back from underneath center, you get that initial push of the defensive line, and it feels like that offensive line starting to come in your lap. You've got to get that separation. You better explode away from there so that you can get back to separate yourself, to survey and confirm what you thought from underneath center. And so all those things are important. I don't think quarterbacks do it enough. I go up to the local high school. Everybody's running shotgun. Everybody's running RPO. Everything's a wide receiver screen. It looks cookie cutter to me. You don't see underneath the center because in professional football, it's still a part of the game. And as much as the college game is infiltrated up, you're going to have to be able to do that in short yardage, in goal line, and it bothers me when teams are down at their 1-yard line and they're in shotgun. All it takes is one bad snap. That center's got to get low to the earth because those defenders are still getting low. They're going to respect that. Hey, they could still hand off to the back. So it's about leverage down there. One bad snap and, first and goal at the 1 could become 2nd and 11, and you're outside of the 10-yard range. So,
Tommy's chomping at the bit because he's an offensive lineman.
Well,
drives me bananas.
It's because of Jim. Jim and Jeff, the stumble play that Detroit pulled on us this year was from under
stumble
center.
bum.
The stumble bum, that was from under center. So as Jim is saying, the footwork of a quarterback, if you lose it, you still have to gain control. But if you're losing it on purpose to be in control, that's also part of it as well.
All right, well, listen, we got to take a quick break. We got one segment to go. I don't want to rush the last segment, so let's take a break right here. This is Bears Weekly on ESPN 1000 and the Bears Radio Network.
Welcome back to Bears Weekly on the Bears Radio Network. Here's your host, the voice of the Bears, Jeff Joniak.
This segment of Bears Weekly brought to you by IGS Energy. We have about 5 minutes to go in tonight's show, so time for the whip around round, guys. So many things to touch base. Larry Mayer of ChicagoBears.com just wrote an article on he picked 12 writers, and they're mocks. It almost made me crack up, Tom and Jim. 10 different choices for the Bears at number 10. Shamar Stewart, the edge, out of Texas A&M. Kenneth Grant, the defensive tackle out of Michigan. Cornerback Will Johnson, Michigan. Tyler Warren, tight end, Penn State. Will Campbell, tackle LSU. Ashton Genty, the running back from Boise State. Nick Emignori, the safety out of South Carolina. Armand Membo, the right tackle out of Mizzou. Calvin Banks, the offensive tackle out of Texas. And Abdul Carter. Is this what we're looking at here? This is a potpourri of choices, Jim. I mean, my goodness, there are so many different ideas. Let's throw in Mason Graham as well in that mix. Michael Williams, Josh Simmons. These are all names that people have been mocking.
Yeah. And, hey, all good players in their own right. I mean, I think we know, like, the first round, there's probably about 17 guys that are true first-rounders is what it is. But where the Bears are picking, they're going to get a marquee guy. So it's really take their pick. And some will, I remember, why am I forgetting the defensive tackle? Jacksonville took a defensive tackle, and everybody said, that's a reach. But they were kind of pigeonholed, and so they selected the D tackle because that was their need. And the guy ended up playing. He played for the Steelers. He ended up playing like 14 years. And so, It wasn't a bad pick at all where he was picked by Jacksonville. And so, I just think the Bears are in a prime opportunity. I do think some good tackles will be there. Some of the top pass rushers will be there. And a lot of it is because I don't think quarterbacks are going to be driving the top of the draft. So I think what the Bears, if they truly want to take what they feel is the best player on the board, whether it's tight end, whether it's tackle, whether it's a defensive tackle, whether it's an edge rusher, or say either the top safeties that you just mentioned, a couple of them, Eman Worry and obviously Starks out of Georgia. But there's going to be good players right there with where the Bears are selecting, no matter where they're picking, and they will be a true first-round draft pick is what they'll get.
Go ahead, Tom.
One thing about this draft I'm looking at is after the first 3 picks, is every team after that going to be looking to move? Is every team after that going to look in the trade to see if they can increase the amount of picks they have round 2 through 7 or 3 through 7? And so this is the confusing thing about this draft is because there is no, bona fide top 10s. There's a bona fide top couple, and then everybody else is looking to maneuver, move, or see what their biggest need is.
Tom and Jim, when I first started working with the Bears in '97, and shortly after that, Jerry Markbright, the Chicago native, he retired from the NFL in 1998 after 23 seasons. He had 25 playoff assignments, 4 Super Bowls. Used to write a weekly column, if you might remember, for the Tribune. So it was brought to my attention by Tom today. The NFL cracked down on accountability among officials. 3 were relieved of their duties and sent to the college football Power 5 conferences by the VP of Officiating, Training, and Development, Ramon George. Is this a good thing? Is this a sign of the future? What do you think, Tommy?
I think it's a good thing. I think there's accountability for every single official that has retained their job in making sure that held to a different set of circumstances, that times are changing, that because of the public accountability for the outcome of these games or missed calls, that every one of these guys are going to face a different scrutiny.
And listen, Jim, we only have 30 seconds, but Mark Bright used to come in and analyze the other officials watching tape, and Tom would come in there red-faced after game. In the world of podcasts, I wish that was one of them, Jim.
Yeah, well, hey, I think everybody just wants accountability, and it's been far too long. players get released, coaches get released, and for officiating, they got to be held to task too. They've got a responsibility, and hey, if they need to move on or move to a different league, so be it.
All right, boys. Great show. Thank you, Jim. Thank you, Tom. Thanks, everybody, for listening. Thanks to our producers, including Kendra Smith in studio. This has been Bears Weekly on the new radio home of the Chicago Bears, ESPN Chicago. Bleck and Abdallah are next. Have a good night, everybody.